Hello, welcome back. It is week 139 here on Out on That Line podcast. I'm Jeff, and my co-host is looking like a top shop tyrant. Even his haircut's violent. It's Alex. How you doing this week?
I love that. Did you pen that just now?
That was by none other than the band Idols in the song Never Fight a Man with a Perm.
What a coincidence, Jeff. What album would we happen to be covering this week?
Oh, it's going to be an Idols album. I'm going to try to pronounce it. It's Tangk. So it's Tangk. And apparently you're supposed to put like a little emphasis on the G sound.
A little stank on the tank.
And I'm like, maybe in a British accent, that's something that's easier to do. I can't seem to make sense of it. So I'm just going to say Tank when I talk about the name of this album, as much as I might mention it in this episode. So what was your familiarity with Idols previous to this?
I can't tell you. This is going to show my level of familiarity with Idols. I can't tell you either the name of the album or the name of the song. I just know I've heard something from whatever album has the artwork of the guy getting crushed in the face with the pink ball.
Okay.
What is that? Crawler? Brutality? Crawler?
Crawler, I think, was the building, but hold on, because that was their previous album for
Crawler
this.
was
But
what they did before this?
Yes, I'm gonna look up. Let's see.
We're
here.
really getting right in the biscuits with this one.
We're getting right in the biscuits. So
right down to the
that
biscuits.
is Ultra Mono is the album
Ultra
you're
Mono.
talking about from 2020. So all of the like top songs on Spotify right now for Idols are literally all from this new album. So there's like one of Dancer has 8.4 million. That's the one that they did with LCD Sound System on this album.
Yeah.
But Idols came out. I was read up on them a little bit because I've listened to them a decent amount over the last few years. That song "Never Fight a Man with a Perm" is absolutely a banger, like a banger of bangers. Absolutely, I recommend going out and listening to that because I think that's like the most Idols song there is. It's fantastic. Always kind of known for their sense of humor. The way that they write their rhyme schemes is very interesting on a lot of songs and definitely presents itself on this new album we're going to talk about. But I've listened to them quite a bit, and they're very like varied in their approach. They did an NPR Tiny Desk concert that was phenomenal. If you get a chance to watch that, like just energy is like what these guys bring, especially the lead singer. I'm gonna blank on his name, but we'll put it in the comments or something.
Joe Talbot.
Joe Talbot, thank you for the assist. He's just a very like straightforward kind of singer, and I think very like varied in how he presents himself. Like he can do that very raw, like punk, guttural, screaming, like very angry sort of shredded vocals. And then he can also just plain sing, so I think they are like a multi-talented kind of band. Very much give me like Turnstile vibes in the multiple like influences that they bring together into this just kind of like punk concoction. They've been fantastic for a while. Seems to continue to be that case.
Yeah, Joe Talbot seems to me, in the research that I've done, to be like a very intense guy, a very interesting guy who feels like very big emotions, but an intense dude. Like you hear him in interviews where he's just like, fuck the king up his fucking royal ass. You're like, ah. And some of that is on this album, and it's great. It's like the ultimate. This album is like the ultimate piss and vinegar thing, but it's like a love themed album. That's kind of what I thought was interesting about it. Having heard really truly the only other Idols that I knew was Beachland Ballroom off the last album, which is not like anything that's on this album. So going into it, I was kind of surprised, and then like thematically, it's all about, you look at Joe Talbot being like, it's the love album. I wanted some positivity. I wanted some like lighter themes, and I'm like, there ain't nothing lighter about this.
No.
It's all very intense, and some of it I was like, this is completely incongruous with what he's talking about, because he's like talking about some super hateful shit, Um, but then you realize that that's in contrast. It is truly an album about love, and that's in contrast to all these other like loving things he's talking about, like all these songs about his daughter. So it was interesting.
Yeah, and this was like they're known for for some very angry music. They're very outspoken politically, socially, like whatever the case may be, and they tend to lean very, very far left.
Oh yeah.
Kind of what you would expect, I guess, like the real, true, like punk ethos to be, is just you shouldn't have the haves and have-nots. Like everybody should be working together. I think that's kind of what's carried through that scene for years and years, and why bands, and since those problems haven't been fixed, there's always going to be a place for bands like Idols. Now, I think just calling them a punk band, even though I think that's what people tend to think of them most, I think that's a little unfair, especially after this album, because there is so much on this where they are, electronic artists. They have a lot of like kind of R&B, like much slower songs. I think they bring a lot of different influences in here. I'm going to compare again to Turnstile, who get called a hardcore band, but if you listen to Glow On, like there's so many other things going on. There's jazz, there's Afrobeat, drumming going on, just really incredible funky bass lines. And it's the same thing with Idols, is they don't limit themselves to just that anger, that punk sound, as much as they maybe used to. I think they've really felt like now is the time to explore, similar to bands like My Chemical Romance that started out just like absolute piss and vinegar when they came out, like that Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge album. There's songs like Helena that, really are a little bit slower, Ghost of You, a little bit slower, but there's some songs like Give 'em Hell Kid that are like just straight up hardcore songs. And then they get to Welcome to the Black Parade, and they've opened up their sound in this huge way. I feel like this is that moment for Idols where they were kind of lumped in, put in this box as this certain type of band, and then they release an album like this where that maybe makes up half of the album is music like that. There is so many other musical elements to this, so much like dynamic um kind of difference between these songs, that it's really, really interesting all the way through. I felt like it was kind of over in a flash, with how much I was enjoying these songs every time I listened through.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It did kind of feel like they just rocketed one song into another. 11 tracks and each one just like pipeline one to the other. Um and I think this was a really interesting place for me to come in on Idols, because coupled with the research I was doing, where Joe Talbot is basically like, fuck we're not a fucking punk band. Stop calling us a punk band. You can call them post punk. They get pissed off about that too. And yet it's like, well, that's like kind of what this is. You cannot like the label, but I'm sorry, how I would categorize you. Um, but even so, like reading that's how they feel about that label, and then going into this album, this isn't really like there's a lot of like post-punk in it, but they do some weird like disco stuff. You were talking about Afrobeat, the jungle, like that
Mhm,
song. You can tell that guitar part was written as a bass part and then turned into a guitar part.
mhm,
Um, you can just tell, and they do weird experimental stuff like that. Like they were talking about like the drummer was doing weird like syncopations and time signatures and stuff, and they couldn't quite crack it, so they had to do it a normal way and then have him come in and re-record drums doing them a different way, so it's all like slightly out of sync. I just think stuff like that is cool, and all of it comes together perfectly in the good hands of Nigel Godrich. I knew
mhm,
when I listened to this, I was like, this sounds so much like another album I just listened to, Wall of Eyes by The Smile, which I listened to and
mhm,
I went, wow, this reminds me so much of Radiohead. Well, it is a Radiohead offshoot, also produced by Nigel Godrich, who
mm,
produced a lot of Radiohead stuff. Um, and it's definitely got those fingerprints all over it. It's just this like big lush. I mean, they looped a bunch of shit.
mhm,
Really, really, really well constructed as far as like completely 360 full sound. And so those post-punk moments kick you right in the ass. And then those more kind of atmospheric experimental things just like completely swallow you up.
Mhm.
It's a very cool kind of dynamic they strike.
Yeah, and I will say there's a lot of albums where this doesn't really matter that much. Like you could take like the Zach Bryan album and realize that on headphones or your car speakers or just a regular little like Bluetooth speaker, that album's not going to change a lot for you either way. Same thing with like a Jason Isbell, because that's not the point. The production on this album is so night and day different when you listen to it on a good pair of like headphones versus something, it still sounds great in the car on your regular Bluetooth speaker and everything like that, but it is such a night and day difference when you can hear that full sound and like every sound that they mean for you to hear, as you're listening to that album on headphones. It is such a different experience, and something, if you're going to listen to this one and you have the time and the means to do it, like listen to it on a good pair of headphones because you will not regret it. There are so many moments in this. I was thinking in Pop Pop Pop, there are some extremely interesting musical moments on that. Roy,
That you might miss if you don't have a good pair of headphones
exactly,
on.
exactly. Like those bass lines were some of the bass lines in this were just unbelievable. Like how almost like the decline level bass lines when they go through the breaks between like the certain like kind of stanzas of that song. Just truly, truly great work. It basically all the way around musically on this, and then the production just takes it to such a different level.
Dude, Pop 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 has such a great Euro trash hook to it.
Hmm.
It's like a super groove. Um, and then like we got to talk about some of these fucking lyrics here in the outro. I scrutinized this. I puzzled over this all day. Cathedral of trees over dilated eyes, a sea of screams under mackerel skies. Imposter, imposter, living in my head. Am I the spider in your bed? A dead canary and a thief for a king, a cheerleader valiant, but I will sing about love. Love, love is the thing. I puzzled over who's the cheerleader valiant, the the dead canary and the thief for a king. At one
Hmm.
point, I was like, "Is that Princess Diana and Prince Charles or King Charles?" I guess now. Literally just like turning over silly shit in my head, turning over serious shit, and just can't crack it. It's just a mystery to me. It might as well be like in another language that can't be translated. And I kind of love that. Like
Hmm.
sometimes gibberish stuff, like weird stuff, like Dave Grohl would do, just doesn't land. But this is like so we talk about like when Nirvana does inscrutable stuff, it's very intentional. This is the same thing. This is very intentional. This definitely has a meaning, but it's like
Hmm.
David Lynch. He's not going to like tell you what it is. So I guess you
Yeah.
kind of got to do your best to figure it out. And I really enjoy that on, again, this like very Euro trash song.
Yeah, it was I there were so many interesting choices for, kind of the tone of voice used for singing each of these songs. It was wildly different from song to song. Like it was almost as if there were like it was different bands playing a lot of these songs because they were so different from one another. Like Dancer versus Pop Pop Pop. Dancer is for me like far and away the best song on this album. I mean, that song hit me like a ton of bricks the first time through. It
Dancer is
has
heavy.
heavy and it's got LCD sound system. And I was like, I had seen that they were on the album, but I was like, the first time I was listening through, I don't really pay attention to like which song it is specifically. I just put it on, just kind of listen to it. And then I'll go back and know kind of where the strong moments were and stuff like that. Cause I don't want to just through the first listen, just kind of automatically pick which songs that I know I'm going to pay more attention to next time. So if I don't really like look at the track list, I can't keep track of that. So I will make sure, to listen to it all the way through again. But this one, immediately, I knew exactly which spot it was. I was like, I think this is like the fifth or sixth song on the album, and I'm going to come back to this one. Apparently, I'm not the only one because that's like the most popular one that they have going on, at least on Spotify right now, which I assume it's probably the same across the other services. But the way that the LCD sound system vibe gets in there, it's like you just know that they were involved. It has that kind of like, again, almost like that disco sort of dance beat to it. It's just so fantastic and heavy at the same time. It's the same thing again. I'm going to bring up that Turnstile Glow On album because I think they did this perfectly as well. You can be as heavy as you want. If it doesn't groove, it's not going to matter. At a certain point, people are going to, it's going to be a novelty and it's going to wear off. But if it grooves, people will come back to it over and over and over. Look at Pantera. People still listen to everything they'd put out in the 90s because it was just that just groovy metal. That is what they accomplish when they do their same thing that they've always done, basically, but it seems to be at such a peak level of musicianship, of performance, of songwriting than they've ever been at before. Um, I think getting to this point, you kind of knew that they were going to be destined to be at least a very good band from the UK for a long time. They didn't seem to have problems with each other, which is typically an issue with a lot of bands that come out of there. They've been consistent. They've been around for 7 years and released 5 albums. So, I think going forward, if they can build on this, and they don't have to do this sound again, it'd be cool to hear them try to do a country album after hearing how different they can go on this. I just really, really appreciate when bands put something together like this album these days. I got the same feeling when I listened to SZA. I got the same feeling when I listened to that Jeff Rosenstock album. It's just, it's nice to see that people are still able to really, truly kind of like spread out creatively and just see what there is out there. Like, you don't have to be just a punk band. You don't have to be just like a dance band. You can do multiple things, and you can even do multiple things on the same album. Just really well put together, fantastically performed, and I'm definitely going to see them when they come through Austin.
Oh, nice. And you can do all of these things. You can put a little bit in every song. Like in Dancer, you've got, I mean, LCD Sound System is a sound, right? It's a very identifiable sound that is woven into the DNA of like a metal disco song. Like this was the song that for me solidified like the drummer on this. Just coming in clutch, like the drumming on this album, impeccable. We've seen some really, really great, like we had the Future Islands album where it's like the rhythm section was just absolutely crushing. It's a great year to be a drummer in a well-received project out on that line.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of that on this album, even in stuff I didn't really like Grace I wasn't crazy about.
Mm-hmm.
But you can tell it was all built from the drum machine up. Like an 80s drum machine is like a very delicate, very specific choice, which like totally informed the way the whole thing sounds. Maybe that's why I don't like love it. And I didn't love Hall and Oates, but then you get into Jungle and
Mm-hmm.
you get the, again, one of my most favorite things on this album is the lyrics. They're always just like, he's half a bubble off from Elvis Costello in the sense that I think he takes it further than Elvis Costello does in terms of, or Steely Dan in terms of
Don't do that.
the lyricism.
Don't do
Hey
that.
man,
Don't do that to this album.
I would just like to point out that you got 3 Turnstile references in it. This is my first mention of Steely Dan. Thank you very much. But like I love that this song is great because again, it's got that like clearly written on a bass. It's like a bass line played by a guitar. And then it's just like all these different scenarios of like mental illness and police brutality. It's like very theatrical. And you get lyrics like Sam placed the choir boy's head on the Bank of England's step. He raised his leg to knight the poor man with his knee, and that's where the story ends. So someone got curb stomped.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's just done in such an evocative way. Like the imagery of it is so very clear, but it's also done, it's like not on the nose. It's very visual. It's again very brutal, very aggressive for a song that just totally grooves. So they just pull all kinds of weird tricks like that out of the bag. And again, some stuff Like Gratitude to me was maybe the weakest song. If Monolith is a weird way to end the album,
Yeah.
but everything up to it, I mean, the vocals on Roy when he opens up on the
Mm.
fucking chorus of that, holy shit, dude.
Roy was, if Dancer didn't exist, I think Roy would have been my favorite song on the album.
100%.
It just, again, like Idols, they can just hit like a ton of bricks. Like they can, I'm telling you that Never Fight a Man with a Perm is just, it will get you fired up. And the lyrics are so clever and so realistic. It's just what Idols does. I mean, songs like Jungle, songs like Dancer, songs like Roy, it just is consistently now what Idols does. They just, what Idols do. I don't know however you would organize that sentence. Now I've got my putting my English teacher hat on. I'm like, well, Idols is their name. It's not plural. It's just a singular thing. But I digress. But it really, the way that they run that, probably, I would say you're right. And the end of the album is a little bit Gratitude and Monolith, a little bit of a weird way to end it. And Grace wasn't that great. But the rest of it was strong, like very good to excellent, on the rest of the album. I think it's so hard to do when you vary the types and like genres that you're doing throughout that whole process to make all of that consistently as good as everything else. I think is a really, really impressive thing. I think you're right to point out the lyrics. I think that's almost definitely goes under the radar with Idols, is their music is so interesting and so energetic. And their shows are so wild that a lot of people don't pay a lot of attention to how good of songwriters and like lyricists that they are. And the way he delivers is, like you said, he's very intense. And that comes through in the music. Like every bit of emotion is right there in his voice, right where it's supposed to be. Those songs where he's feeling a little bit more down or trying to make sure that the mood is down, he's singing that way. He's not singing the same way that he does on Dancer or on Roy as he does on Jungle. It's meant to provide a different feeling, and they are so good at making sure everything matches what that emotional response is supposed to be so that it can come to its fruition like at its best.
You have a song like Gift Horse, where they kind of go with the less is more approach, where the entire chorus is just look at him go. They literally don't say anything other than that. So in some songs you can have these like very mysterious lyrics that you pour over, and then you have stuff like Gift Horse, which is just like this pissed off mile a minute anti-royalist song that's dedicated to Joe Talbot's daughter. And I 100% just see this image. It's like the most badass song. And I just see like slow-mo him and his daughter. And I don't know how old she is, but I picture her as like 5 in a puffy coat and aviators, sucking on a lollipop like it's a cigarette. Just the coolest kid ever. And just walks up to this like horsey ride that's outside of a supermarket, drops a quarter in that thing, and just starts going. And it's in like the most metal slow-mo ever. Look at him go. When I think about the juxtaposition of the sound and the fact that he's on record as being like, I wrote it for me daughter. I imagine that's how he sounds.
Close.
So, was that what he intended? It's what I got out of it. Because again, some songs, another song I listened to recently, unrelated, a band called Doom Flamingo, and they have a song called Purifier, and it puts you in such a specific time and place and image. And I love when a song can do that through the power of suggestion, backed by incredible musicianship, and great lyrics and incredible production. So for me, I'm probably, this isn't the kind of thing I would buy on vinyl. I've kind of got a moratorium on buying vinyl in general right now.
Mm-hmm.
But if I could, I would buy it.
Yeah, I think absolutely buy it for me on this one. And I would also recommend digging in to their previous work as well, because they've been excellent for a long time.
I will. I surely will.
I can't believe it's been this long since we've really covered Idols in depth on this podcast. I think this is the first time, other than brief mentions maybe, that we ever have.
This is the first time I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend go back and listen to that stuff. I'm gonna go back and check out probably all their albums again after this one, because they're all good. A couple of them are great, so I would really definitely recommend it. I'm gonna buy it. Sounds like Alex is going to stream it. There are no skip-its this week for Idols and the album Tangk.
Tang.
Yeah,
That
Tangk.
Tang.
Yeah, apparently it's supposed to be what they wanted the guitars to sound like. I
Uh
feel like that makes it make less sense for me. So we're gonna,
yeah, I've never heard a guitar make the sound tang.
yeah.
Tang.
Maybe that's their holy grail. Is they're gonna make albums till they get that sound, and then that's it. Then they're
They
done.
just like all their albums in concept just become like a prolonged stroke. By the
Yeah.
end of it, it's just wingdings. We don't know what it is. We don't know what to call it.
Yeah, it's just each album is just that sound through a different amplifier. This is the Marshall Tank.
Tang. The greatest moment since Tang.
Well, these everybody out there, you can tell us how you would pronounce that album name down there in the comments at a little place I like to call youtube.com/C/out on that line. And you're going to make sure that you hit that little notification button. It looks like a bell, I'm pretty sure these days. Hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss anything that we put out there. Make sure you put in the comments what you want to see us cover, both in these full-on album review video episodes, also in our singles episodes, also in our reaction episodes, and maybe even some of those on the record episodes. So you let us know what you want to hear. And Alex, do you have any final thoughts for this week?
Folks, don't overthink this one, okay? Just do what the man said. I wish I could say I implore you, but this is a mandate. And you know this. You know this about me at this point. I'm constantly saying this. So why don't you do us all a favor? Do what the man said. Until next time.